Hello everyone. Q's judging on season 16 has been very interesting to say the least, and today I'm going to be going placement by placement to determine exactly how good or bad it was. Q's judging can very easily be divided into three different eras. The first era is generally fair judging. Q's first episode is the talent show, and I believe this one is objectively correct. As much as fans of the show like to judge along and form their own opinions, Raid a Queen allowed professional drag queens to do the judging without any storyline incentives. In my opinion, when no queens are actively trying to rig the twist, it can result in some of the fairest judging, as only drag queens know how difficult it is to be drag queens. With all of that in mind, Q's top 2 placement is accurate. The next episode Q participates in is the Mother of All Balls for the same reasons this one is fair. While some people have switched up the judging here, I think Q is a solid second place, so for these episodes, Q's judging is fair. The next episode is RDR Live, and this is the final episode of the fair judging era. For this challenge, there were some good rolls and there were a lot of bad rolls. Q was lucky enough to get one of the good rolls. Being the first brick that was thrown at Stonewall allows for a lot of comedic opportunities, and for the first time all season, Q actually gets to show off her comedy. In this challenge, she is good and she was a solid second place, meaning we have now gone 3 for 3 for fair judging. One would hope that that trend would continue, but sadly, it would not. We now enter the second era of Q's judging where things are ever so slightly rigged, and by that I mean they are pretty rigged. I would like to preface this section by saying that I mean no hate to Q, it is absolutely not her fault the judges decided to judge her the way they did. We arrive at episode 5, which is girl groups, and this is where things start to go wrong. This is the first challenge all season that is not directly within Q's skill set, and it very much shows in her confidence. While I could talk about Q not being the strongest dancer, I'm not going to. Some queens are just not strong dancers, and that's not really their fault. As a terrible dancer myself, I know how Q feels. What I will talk about is her verse and performance look. These are things that are much more within Q's skill set and control, and she still kinda underperforms. The verse is not bad per se, but it is the worst of the night, then the performance look is just all around weak. I don't know what was going on here because in general this season, Q had really good runways. This was just a rare miss, I guess. For the actual judging, Q lands in the bottom 2. This is fair and somewhat unexpected though, as production has a tendency to save their favorites early on. I could absolutely see a universe where production says the Courage to Love team is second best and they're all safe, thus saving Q from the bottom. Luckily for us, the season is fair and decides to put Q in the bottom with a mandatory meeting. The queens lip sync for their lives and it is a mess. This was a very bad lip sync, and while I'm not going to say this should have been a double elimination, it definitely could have been. Q, as we have discussed earlier, is not a particularly strong dancer. Then you have Amanda, who is just kind of messy all around. In general, Amanda is a really good dancer, but it did not show in this lip sync because of how over the top everything was. She was at 100% the entire time, and it just didn't really fit the song. After the lip sync, production announces Q as the winner. This is incredibly controversial and pretty rigged as Q was the clear loser. It is very clear that this lip sync was judged based off track record and that angered a lot of people justifiably. This is where the fanbase started to really turn on Q and it would only get worse from here. I understand why production felt that judging based off track record was a good choice, but in the end it did not yield good results and it did not yield fair results. Q gets a well-deserved win in the design challenge and we move on to the Rusical. The top 2 of the week are very clearly Saphira and Plasma, leaving Q and Plain to fight it out for that final slot. If we're judging based off the challenge, I would give it to Plain. Plain had some moderately difficult choreo, was on the screen for a fair amount of time and didn't mess up once. But then you had Q who had a much easier part, but it was also more prominent of a role. If we're going based off runways though, I would give it to Q. Q had a very unique concept, and while the silhouette was something we had seen before, it was still very well executed, while Plain's concept was just a bit basic. With all of that in mind, I think I can chalk this decision up to a difference in taste. I would give the slot to Plain, but I can't really blame anyone who gives it to Q. She did a good job with what she was given in the challenge, it's just that she wasn't really given that much. The next episode is the Goth Design Challenge, and this is where queens really started to get mad at Q's judging. Based off the challenge, we have a clear bottom 2 of Maya and Plasma, then we have a clear middle 3 of Saphira, Plain, and Morphine, and a top 3 of Dawn, Q, and Nymphia. Zooming in on the top 3, we have Dawn, who went very much in the direction of fairy goth. It's elfy, there's a lot of feathers, but it is still a very impressive sewing job. Then we have Nymphia, who very clearly went in the direction of classical goth, a lot of intricate details, and a good sewing job, but the downside is we don't really see it based off the fabric she chose. And then we have Q, who went 100% in the direction of neo-goth. The decision to go with neo-goth comes with pros and cons. On the pros, she absolutely stands out in this lineup. The more intricate details of Dawn and Nymphia got completely swallowed up by this fabric, while Q's details are on full display since she used white fabric. The main con for Q though is that neo-goth is much more niche of a concept, so her look definitely stands out from the other good looks. This decision made a lot of people mad, and while I understand that, it didn't make me as mad as everyone else. Personally, I still would have given the win to Nymphia, but I understand how Q got it. If the prompt is classic goth, it goes to Nymphia, no question, but if the prompt is neo-goth, I could see it going to Q, and based off that, I understand why production did what they did. This is probably the controversial decision I understand the most. We arrive at the final era of Q's judging where things get really, really bad. The first challenge in this era is the Power Anthems Challenge. It is pretty much just girl groups, but political. This is not good for Q, as based off her previous performance, she is in danger. The queens perform in the challenge, and things do not go great for Q. Her verse was once again a complete mess, I don't really know what was going on. Her performance look was just Lord Farquaad as a drag queen, and her dancing was once again on the weaker side. Based off all of that and an average runway, Q should probably be in the bottom again. Luckily for Q, this episode, production randomly decides to do a non-elimination. If I picked the bottom 2 for this episode, it would have been Q and Dawn. If production picked it, it would have been Plain and Q. Either way, Q would absolutely lose that lip sync to Made You Look. Doing a non-elimination this week absolutely benefits Q, and she was 100% saved here. I don't know if this is controversial, but this, in my opinion, is the worst the favoritism of Q gets. As much as I love Q as a drag artist, if she didn't go in girl groups, she definitely should have gone this week. Next is the Improv Hosting Challenge, and Q actually does a really good job and probably should have won. As happy as I am that Saphira got the win and that Nymphia got to shine, I believe that challenges as collaborative as this deserve to be judged in teams, and based off that, Q and Plain are the strongest team and both should have gotten the win. This decision, in my opinion, was made almost entirely to try and get Q to face crack, which she 100% did. I don't know how many of you were watching Q's facial expressions during that lip sync, but Jesus Christ, she was going through it. The next episode is the Bathroom Design Challenge, and I genuinely don't know if I count this as rigged or not. Saphira and Plain get the win, leaving Dawn, Morphine, Nymphia, and Q as the bottom 4. Based off runways and performances, Nymphia is very obviously the best queen of these and should have been safe, leaving us with Dawn, Morphine, and Q. If we are judging based off challenge performances, Dawn and Morphine are in the bottom, but if we are factoring in runways, it maybe should have been Dawn and Q. Overall, I'm not willing to say this episode was 100% rigged for Q. Please let me know how you would have done this in the comments, but for me, this one just comes down to how much you weigh runways. If you give them a lot of weight, Q is in the bottom. If you're judging more based off challenge performances though, Q is in the bottom. The most recent episode at the time of filming this is the makeover, and this is favoritism. It's just a matter of how much. The clear best 2 of the week are Plain Jane and Nymphia. Whether you agree with Plain's win or not, they were the best. Saphira's makeover was a bit of a mess, and she is definitely taking one of the slots in the bottom. It's now a question of Morphine and Q. I think there's a pretty solid argument for either one of them, which makes Q's high placement even more baffling. For Morphine, you have a classic good makeover and a great mug. The downsides, though, are that she messed up on the dance and that the wig just did not fit her makeover partner. The makeover partner had a bigger head and bigger shoulders, which should have required a much larger wig than what she was given. Then with Q, we have a good concept, I guess, but it's not really tailored to Q's style of drag, and the look is not form-fitting, which means she brought this from home and kinda just called it a day. With all of that in mind, while I would still put Morphine in the bottom, Q being high is absolutely ridiculous. Production cannot tell me this was a good makeover. While I would not have put Q in the bottom 2, I almost definitely would have put her as low. In the end, Q's judging was not good, in fact it was pretty bad, but I don't think it's as awful as people say. Getting saved in girl groups was really bad, getting saved in the Anthems challenge was really bad, while the rest of Q's controversial decisions could technically be explained away by a difference in taste. It is very telling that every time it comes down to a difference in taste, production always sides with Q every single time. That, in my opinion, makes her track record rigged. Although I don't think she deserves the hate she gets for her track record, this is 100% on production. Hey, it's Drag Race Rejudged. Do you want gay shit? Well then check out the RuPaul's Drag Race Rejudged YouTube channel and hit subscribe.